What do you think drives your boys, your sons, to continue in spite of facing the world's biggest dictatorship?
What I hear from them time and time again are two things. The first is they found their band of brothers. I mean, it's super clear, and that's always been pretty important for both of them. Both of my boys were fairly accomplished baseball players from the time they were young, and so they were on travel teams. And I remember one time sitting down and having a talk with my older son about that. And he mentioned one of the things he loved about baseball was the time in the dugout. He loved the camaraderie of the team as much as he loved the game. And that's something that really drove him. And same with the younger son. And so one of the things that drives them is really just the environment. They love how close. I mean, it's sort of like, I try and explain it because we have, these families. When we first moved, we were in New Jersey, and we first moved out. And so all these families and all their old friends are always constantly asking, how's Jesse and Lucas? What are they doing? What's up? And they're always asking me about the school. And I try and, how do you explain it? It's like part Juilliard, part West Point, part summer camp. I mean, it's sort of like you put all those together and I say that because on the artistic side, they're learning from some of the best in the world in terms of how to do classical Chinese dance. And so the bar is as high as you can get on the artistic side. It's more sort of West Pointy in that there is a real discipline, but it's more like the discipline you see in Asian context. Like if you've ever taken karate, you go in and the respect that you see of the karate master, and you bow when he comes into the room, the discipline that which the karate class is carried out. You get that in a dance class. It's interesting when we go watch their final exams of each semester, right? When they're in school, and all the dancers line up, and the dance teacher comes out. They bow to the dance teacher, they bow to the audience, and then they get started. And so there's this wonderful discipline that they're also learning in the school that I find fascinating. That's really just a shame we've lost a lot of that in the West. See, you still see it a bit of in the East. Like I remember, even in baseball, right? You go to see a Taiwanese baseball game, and the first time up, everybody at the batter's box, they bow to the umpire, right? Yep. And all this stuff. So there's still this sort of this respect and decorum that I think is important in the East in general, and you have that in the dance classes. And so that's all of those things together. They've really found a wonderful band of brothers, and that's really one of the two pillars that drives them. The second is, I think they have a real visceral sense that they're involved in something big. It's not just, hey, let's get up there on stage and show a culture. I think they have a sense that traditional, authentic Chinese culture is quite universal, and it's something that's very uplifting. And they have a sense that it's really important in the world today. Because you look around and, it's getting dicey, in terms of the negativity and the tribal politics and how much people hate each other just because of their opinions don't agree. And there's just a lot of negativity in the world. And they get a clear sense of that. They know that. And I think they see Shen Yun as a way to give people something else, to give people a real experience that's uniting. It's sort of showing people, instead of all the ways in which we think differently and we act differently and our interests are against each other, it's like showing people our common humanity, the good side of it, and the fact that that's something that should be cherished. It's very hopeful. And so, a lot of times when you go to a Shen Yun show, as you know very well, there's often people come out of the theater and they give interviews and say, what did you see in there? And they talk about what the show is like. Well, my boys watch those actually quite often, because you get to see what people experience in the theater, and that's very inspiring. So they have a real sense that they're not just, putting on a show for a fun night. They have a real sense that they're kind of giving people an experience that's very hopeful and that can actually, help them think differently, more positively, can actually touch people, change people's lives. So they get a sense for that. So it's those two ththings. They're sort of the best of both worlds. They've got this band of brothers they found, and they've got this wonderful mission, which for me, I'll just on a personal level, That was one of the things I always worried. I worried about a lot of stuff as a parent. But growing up, one of the things I worried about, because I see so many kids never kind of finding their thing. You know, they're always they're looking for a group, or they're looking for a skill, or they're looking for something that's theirs. You know, that's sort of, it's a way to like, oh, I belong. I have a purpose. I have a value. And so many kids, I mean, even some of the kids that I grew up with, but sort of in my boys' generation, you know, some kids really floundering. And I think, you know, some of them go off in a bad direction because they didn't find that. And so that was always a concern. Are they going to find their thing? Something that really deep in their heart, it's like, this is why I'm here. This gives my life purpose. And I was afraid they didn't really lock into that. And it was like, so for a while it was baseball, and then it was this, it was that. And when they first started going to Fei Tian, and then they started being able to tour with Shen Yun, it was like, oh, they found it. They found it. And that was a big sigh of relief for me, because I know I had that experience, you know, as a young man, you know, the day I sort of found out what I was going to do and what I wanted. There's something very empowering about it. There's something very fulfilling about it. And to see that in your kids, it's sort of like, ah, great.
What was it like for you seeing them perform for the first time?
Cried like a baby. Oh boy. Still do, actually. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, if I may say so myself, I'm not a classical Chinese dance expert, but they're both very beautiful to watch. And they're different. You know, one son has this very sort of commanding presence. You know, when I look at him on stage, I'm like, dude, he's not that tall. You know, there's something going on. But like, he has this way of dancing. It's sort of like, especially when he does like a general or something like that, he's like, there's something very commanding about his presence that is remarkable, that he could turn that on. The other one is a little bit different in that he has sort of this bearing to him. I think the word in Chinese is what?
Yun.
Yun. Okay. He has this bearing in it where he brings something very circular and beautiful out when he's dancing. And it's sort of a different energy than the first. And, you know, not to pigeonhole them in those categories, they get better and better at doing different types of dance. But there's something very fluid and circular about the way he dances. And I just sort of like, it's interesting because you know, they're doing the same thing. They were trained in the same thing. They were raised in the same family. They have the same genes, and they get up on stage, and there's a unique strength to each of them. And to see that come out, and you know, through the Shen Yun training, to see them be able to do that on stage is sort of like, wow. So that's one thing, is to notice their ability and to exhibit those strengths. But also just on stage, you can see it, what I was talking about, that they found their thing. You know, and it's probably not unlike, you know, watching your kid pitch a first inning for the first time in the major leagues, you know, and you know that kid's been working all his life to do that. And, you know, I'm sure parents all over the world experience this, but you see a kid find their thing, be able to do it well and love it. It's just, what else could you ask for as a father?